Hello, Garland Nixon here, and there's talk of Vladimir Putin naming Saudi Arabia as a potential spot for peace talks. There's, the usual neoliberal, neoconservative. We've got to be stronger and frighten the Russians into peace. More weapons. That's the key to peace. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and we're going to talk about all this talk of peace. What does it really mean? Are there any real chances that the Ukraine conflict is going to end in a peaceful and diplomatic resolution? Holy moly, Trump could come to power, and my prediction right now is that Donald Trump will win the election. That's what I'm predicting right now. Could be wrong, so let's kind of look at where things are going. Let's look at what needs to happen for peace. And I'm going to start, generally you begin at the beginning. I'm going to begin at the end. Well, no, you know what? Let's do this. Let's start at the beginning. Let's go through all the info. And then when it's all said and done, I will tell you what I think. Will this end in a peaceful resolution? Will it be able to come to some kind of a agreement here? And what does it all mean? Let's start here. And I'll give you my thoughts on each one. There we go. Here we got the news. I like to have an article that we can talk about. So we got some kind of a foundation here to get moving with, okay? So let's start here. Putin names possible location for peace. Saudi Arabia would be a good country to host a potential summit to end the Ukraine conflict, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Friday. Press conference, variety of topics. So, there's all kinds of stuff going on. And it's the BRICS. That's the big deal. Saudi Arabia, of course, being a close partner of Russia. One of the reasons, of course, is oil. The OPEC, now what used to be the oil producing countries used to have an organization called OPEC. Now it's OPEC plus, and the plus is Russia. And certainly, let's face it, when it comes to OPEC, the countries with the horsepower are Saudi Arabia and Russia for two reasons. Number one, they're the wealthiest, right? Saudi Arabia's got the most oil of them. It's got the most international clout, so it's carrying the most clout as far as the Gulf nations. But when it comes to Russia, they got serious clout because they are the most powerful nation. They are the most important nation when it comes to world economy because they've got all of these commodities that people need, not just oil. So they're, what usually in the top three oil producing nations and the top three gas producing nations, number one wheat producing nation, which will grow, which is all of that stuff is going to grow with the inclusion of the new territories of Ukraine. So I would argue that Russia is the most powerful of the OPEC nations overall because they got military power. That's the thing. Massive military power, and everybody knows it. And they have there's a historical context to Russia's diplomatic power in Latin America, in Africa, etc., where they helped a lot of countries who were suffering from colonization and imperialism. As the Soviet Union, they helped a lot of them. They armed them, and they helped them to fight against the colonial powers. So they got a lot of love coming from the global South. Okay, so Russia's very, very powerful and very beneficial to the OPEC group, right? So you've got OPEC plus one. So that's why I think one of the reasons that Russia points right to Saudi Arabia. At a press conference on a wide variety of topics, a Saudi journalist, that's consequential, a Saudi journalist asked Putin for his thoughts on the Arab kingdom's mediation efforts. And this that could be a planted question. Maybe not, but it could be. If they could have made a decision beforehand. Understanding that Saudi Arabia is very, very, when it comes to issues of power and press and all that kind of stuff, it is a monarchy. The government does have total control. And I doubt very seriously if a Saudi journalist would be asking Vladimir Putin a question of such a consequential question if it wasn't already ordained, allowed, accepted, maybe even given to him by those in power because he wouldn't want to pay the price if he embarrassed him, the monarch. You know how it is. If you're in a monarchy, let's be honest, it is what it is. I'm not saying I'm in favor of it or I'm a critical of it. Hey, Saudi Arabia is Saudi Arabia. It's none of my business to say how it runs. But, you know, you don't want, if you're in a monarchy, you don't want to embarrass the king. Maybe your last time, right? So this guy says, a Saudi journalist asked Putin for his thoughts on the Arab kingdom's mediation efforts and whether Russia would attend a peace summit should Riyadh host such an event by the end of this year. Putin reaffirmed that Russia views Saudi as a friendly country. He commented to the Saudi leadership for their sincere effort to bring peace. And he says, here we go. So if such an event would be organized in Saudi Arabia, obviously the venue itself would be rather comfortable for us. What is he saying? He's saying, look, that's a friendly country. We work with them. These are our friends. These are our allies, right? He stressed, however, that any final settlement should be based on the draft prepared during the aborted negotiations in Istanbul, Turkey in the spring of 2022. So they go on to give some other historical context in that article. But here's the bottom line. It sounds to me like one of the things that's very, very important to the Russians right now is their diplomatic alliances. Therefore, while I don't think they see some valid and reasonable option, a peace plan coming forth anytime soon, I do think that they want to keep this part in mind. They want to reassure their allies that they are constantly reaching out for peace, that they're amenable to a diplomatic solution, that they're not being unreasonable, even though I don't really think they want a peaceful solution, to be quite frank. And I'll tell you why at some point when we'll get to that. But I think they want to, the only issue that the Russians have here is keeping their allies, and I could use the word at bay, that would be a little too aggressive. I think the world is keep their allies comfortable, not to embarrass their allies, to ensure that their allies can stand up for them because they want to always look like a reasonable country that is seeking peace and that is involved in military conflict only because they see no alternative, right? So I think that's what that's about. Do I expect to see? It's also a signal to everybody that says, look, we're tight with Saudi Arabia. We're willing to talk, but here's the thing. I think there's a deeper message here. It has to be one of our allies. Don't ask us to go to France. Don't ask us to go to Canada. Don't ask us to go to, London. No, we'll go to China. We'll go to Saudi Arabia. We'll go to Iran. We'll go to one of our friends. We're in the driver's seat, and we'll say yes or no about a peace plan based on our criteria, but nobody's going to drag us into peace negotiations. Okay, so I think it was important to to get started by evaluating that particular issue. I don't think it really tells us anything. It's not like Vladimir Putin was in a meeting and just blurted out, "Hey, we want a peace plan. It's got to be in Saudi Arabia. Let's get it done." No, it was, "Hey, man, if this happens, it goes down. If my friend MBS calls me and says, 'Man, we got a peace summit we're putting together, bro, and we can set it up in a way that is respectable to your needs and your security needs, that we won't reject the concept. That we're open to that. We're open.'" Main thing is the Russians. The only real issue the Russians have is to walk that diplomatic tightrope where they give their allies cover. That's the way I'm going to put it. Their allies that are supporting them throughout this are getting a lot of heat from the U.S. and its vassals. And they got to continually give their allies cover so that their allies can say, but the Russians are open for negotiations. So I think part of this is giving Saudi Arabia some cover, giving Brazil and India, these countries that still have very, very close ties, economic, diplomatic, military, with the U.S., giving them some cover so they can say, look, we're working on this thing, trying to get peace. And hey, man, Putin says he'll talk with us. If you want peace, we can do something. It gives them some power. When they go to the United States, it gives them some diplomatic cover. I think that's what this was about. All right, next. Let's see what the next article we want to go to. Yeah, let's go here. Now, there's another issue here if we're going to talk about peace in Ukraine, and that is here's bottom line. It there are the issues in Russia, right? Before I go to this, there are the issues in Russia. The issues being, though they would try to pretend in the West that Vladimir Putin is just some madman dictator who screams to everybody around him, "Do what I tell you, or it's off with your head." Those of us who understand Russia know that's absurdity. That's a caricature of Vladimir Putin and a caricature of Russian politics. That the Russians are very, if you understand Russian politics, just think back to the Soviet Union, their history. They're very meticulous about things. They're very policy oriented. They have a lot of meetings. They go over the details. That's the nature of Russian politics. It still has a legacy of the Soviet Union, where everything's very, very detail oriented, right? So Vladimir Putin still does have effectively a National Security Council. He still does have people, and he got 87% of the vote, and he has a incredibly high support by the people, but he needs to keep that. And he understands that if that starts to deteriorate, you got problems, because once it starts to go, you punch a hole below the waterline and it keeps going down. So he does have to be concerned in his about weaknesses in his country that could arise, political, excuse me, weaknesses that could arise. Okay. So I think some of the things that he's doing are head nods to his people. Now, understanding the Russian people right now, they're angry and they're like, "Hey, put the pedal to the metal." You know what I mean? Let's go. Let's finish this thing off. And he, I think, believes it's not in their best interest to do that. And I would probably agree. But I think he has the support he needs for whatever decision he makes. He's got to be, you look, and the Russian people don't want a peaceful decision. They want him to stomp Ukraine into the ground based on, let's face it, we've got the Crocus City Hall attack, we've got the Kursk incursion, we've got various and sundry drone attacks, kidnap, all kind of terrible things have happened, going all the way back to the Maidan coup and the Odessa massacre, trade union massacres. There's people, Russian people got a bad taste in their mouth. And as Snoop Dogg says, they want some get backs, right? So he's got that to keep in to understand. Those of us who see Russia as a fairly normal nation with the normal political and cultural issues that any country would have, understand that this caricature about Putin just going around waving a sword, cutting people's head off if they don't do what they want, is preposterous. But in the West, that is the propaganda that has to be. That's the propaganda that's used to have the people believe the foolishness that their government, is involved in, to believe that the U.S. government somehow doing all of this imperialism for the best of, the democracy and to make things better for all, right? They're bringing peace and security. How's that going? All right, so let's go to this article. All right, Eurasia Daily. Another Ukraine. The people are waking up and ready to rebel against the Zelensky regime, right? And if you look down there, Ukrainians are starting to rebel. I think a number of factors have caused such riots. First of all, you see what's been happening lately, the so-called Zelensky peace plan, which is not really a peace plan. Okay, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think it's about the peace plan and things like that. I think that while there's something to what they're saying as far as internal instability in Ukraine, that maybe perhaps Eurasia Daily has their own reasons for saying it's about the peace plan. That could be political itself. Who knows? Maybe they truly believe that. But here's my point. Doesn't matter what they think, what they don't think. Here's the point. The truth about Ukraine is it's nothing but a political and military tool of U.S. imperialism. That's all it is. It's nothing but it is a knife that they have sharpened up to stick at the throat of Russia, and they're trying to slash Russia's throat, right? They went into this country. They've been brainwashing these people since the 1940s. They've been CIA has been working in there to undermine the Soviet Union and then Russia to strengthen a very, very unsavory ideology that is founded in the mad rantings of the mustachioed guy from Austria in the 1930s. And the U.S. has felt like that is a valuable ideology that we can use to take out Russia. And to some extent, there are people in this country that, in our leadership, a lot of them that quietly align completely with that ideology, right? And hey, they hate Russians. That'll work. It's kind of, a lot of people refer to them as vanilla ISIS, right? So Bottom line is that the Ukrainians, some of them are kind of waking up. I mean, come on. Let's look at Ukraine. It's torn to shreds. Generations of young men wiped out. Generations of young men. I think there are those now for a few years now. There's been issues basically where, and we see the videos everywhere, we see the evidence everywhere, we see people who anecdotal stories of Ukrainians everywhere, where basically they have, what was called in slavery in America, the paddy rows, right? The slave catchers, the people that caught runaway slaves. How sad is that? They literally have basically slave catchers or people that capture runaway slaves running around Ukraine. And then what they're doing is they're capturing runaway corpses, because what do? They capture you, they stick a gun in your stinking hand, and they send you to the front line to die. The Russians are in that direction, but if you see the Russians shoot, but the bad news is you ain't never going to see the Russians, because all they're going to do is rain down artillery and bombs on you, and you'll be torn to shreds. But we're just going to stick your body here until it gets torn to shreds. Basically, your job is to be dropped off at the front line and to get torn to shreds. And basically, unfortunately, the Ukrainians are very good at getting dropped off at the front line and getting torn to shreds, right? One can imagine that at some point a community would reject that concept, right? That mothers and wives and grandmothers would say, let me understand this right. You're going to take my husband, son, grandson, fill in the blank. You're going to put him in a truck. You're going to beat him, drag him away, put a uniform on him, drop him out in the middle of a field, and he will be torn to shreds. And then a flag will come back and they'll say, bad news. Your little son, Yuri, there, he got what was inevitable, right? He is a martyr, whatever the case may be. By the way, you got any other kids? That's the way it works. One can imagine that at some point that would cause problems in a society. And I think we're rapidly getting there. Not to mention their lives are living hell. I mean, food shortages, electrical shortages, everything. And most people never stop to think about this. Ukraine's not even a country anymore. Every stinking dime, every politician's salary is paid by the United States. Every street sweeper salary is paid by the United States. The pensions are paid by the United States. The food bills, you name it, the bringing in food, that's all paid by the United States. That's right. Us, United States, we're paying now. If you live in Western Carolina and you've had, the hurricane sweep your house and your entire town away, yeah, they got $750 for you, but you got to apply online. And by the way, it's going to be hard because you got no electricity and all the cell towers are down and there's no electricity. We'll run into the cell towers if they were up. So you're going to have a little bit of a trouble applying online, but that's the only way you can get the $750. And what are you going to do with that? Your whole town is gone. Your truck was washed away. Your family, maybe some of them survived, maybe not. Your home, you worked in that town doing things. Ain't no town to work in. You had nothing. But the Biden administration is going to give you $750. Unless, here's something you could do: move to Ukraine. You'll be taken care of. They'll pay your pension if you move to Ukraine. There are people in this country that aren't happy with that. And the fact of the matter is, Ukrainians, I think, increasingly understand that they're nothing but cannon fodder. And how long before cannon fodder gets pissed? I say this, just to stray from the issue of peace. And no, this is not really straying. This is part of the conversation. At the point that this conflict ends, the Ukrainians are not going to be pissed at the Russians. When it ends, they're going to be pissed at the Americans. They're going to be pissed at the Europeans. And what's going to happen when it ends? Millions and millions of Ukrainians are going to say, we're out of here. They're going to cross the border. There will be a refugee flood in Europe. Can you imagine this? A refugee flood from Europe. And the US and the Brits get their war in the Middle East. And there's a refugee flood. Look, think about this. If there's a war in the Middle East, what would there's a billion people there. What would a refugee flood look like coming into Europe from the Middle East? Tens of millions. So you've got millions coming in from the East, tens of millions coming in from the West. Europe, you think you got a refugee problem now. You keep screwing with these neocons, you're done. Oh, by the way, if you get the war in the Middle East, you're not going to be able to get the oil that you need, the energy that you need from the Middle East because there's war there. You piss the Russians off so bad and the US has blown up your pipelines, you're not going to get anything from there. What is Europe going to look like? It's going to look like Ukraine. It's going to look like a war-torn disaster area. And that's what the US wants. The US wants it to look like a war-torn disaster area. Why? Because that's where the money is. Look, right after World War II, Europe was a pile of rubble. The US could control it. And you know what they say? An evil man will burn his country to the ground so he can rule over the ashes. That's all the neocons want to do to Europe, to turn it into a God-forsaken wasteland, just like it was after World War II. So it's not an economic threat to them. And so they can completely control it. So people are walking around, like after World War II, how did people live? The government would give them a little box every week, and it would have a little pork fat in it. It would have some sugar and salt and rice and a few a little bit of flour and things like that, so they could starve all week and have just enough to starve. That was the Marshall Plan, right? And that's what the US wants to send Europe back to, because that's when things were great and the US built up all of its power on Europe's back, because everybody else got flattened in World War II and they didn't. And that's the plan for Europe today. And may I add that the plan right now is going swimmingly. The plan is looking pretty good. If I was in Europe, I'd be a little concerned about that plan, because Olaf Scholz et al. Are part of the plan. You think they don't know it? You think they don't know? They're not. Come on. They blew up the pipeline, and Scholz is like, "I don't." Ooh. And what did they ask him? We do everything together. Really? So like blow up pipelines, Olaf? He couldn't say yeah, but that would be the right answer. And of course, there's the French, there's the Brits who aren't getting some of that gas, saying, who knows? Probably the Russians did it. Maybe it was just a weird and strange accident. Hey, we've been seeing some aliens floating around lately. I bet you one of them hit it with a laser. They can't come out and say the truth, because they know they're going to be all right. They know they're the ruling elite. They know everybody else going to starve. And one thing about the ruling elite, they love to have distance between them and the poor. As you get poorer, there becomes greater distance between them and you, and they're happier. So they're happy. The more devastated the working class is, the better, the more secure they feel, and the more powerful they feel. So that's the direction Europe is going. But at any rate, let's continue. So the bottom line is this: the Ukrainians are stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think what happens is, or the devil there is no deep blue sea, right? There's the devil of Zelensky, and there's the devil of the neocons in Washington. They ain't got no deep blue sea. They're not even going to have access to the deep blue sea by the time they lose Odessa and all of all of their port cities. At any rate, so I think that what you're going to see towards the end of the conflict, one of the things that may actually bring the conflict to somewhat of an end, and it's going to be a pain in the neck for the Russians, is internal conflict, is some kind of a civil war. Look, you got the Banderites who are on board with this 100%. The Banderites were the tool in Ukraine that was used by the neocons to marshal all of Ukraine's resources to throw it up against the wall, and against the Russian wall, right? So the Banderites are going to be like, no, we can't stop. We got to keep fighting. Give us some more stooges to throw, some more corpses to throw to the front line. At some point, them corpses are going to wake up and get pissed. Now they're literally talking about drafting women. Hey, we're run out of men. What do? What do we got left? Women. Good enough. They can die just like men, can't they? Sure. Their little bodies can be torn apart by hot shrapnel. Oh, excellent. Fantastic. Send them to the front line. Okay, that's what's next. How pathetic is that? How horrible is that? The neocons that are standing up for the rights of women. Yes, women have a right to go to the front line and get their bodies torn to shreds by shrapnel, just like men. You sexist pig, you. How dare you stand against women's rights? They give them a pink hat instead of a regular helmet. We would give them a pink helmet. They're going to have a pink helmet. They're going to go right to and when that Fab 500 lands, the only thing's going to be left is that stinking pink helmet bent into 50 pieces, where their bodies all get torn to shreds. I mean, what difference does it make if you're a man or a woman if a 500-kilogram bomb is landing near you? There ain't going to be nothing left anyway. And I think the Ukrainians are starting to figure that out. And at some point towards the end of this conflict, you're going to see civil war in Ukraine. That's what's coming. That's my prediction. Civil war in Ukraine. Okay, let's continue with the next. Let's see what we got. And I think this is we got a couple different things. Well, let's go with the Washington Post. You always got to go with the Washington Post if you want to know what's coming out of the intelligence community and the stinking filthiest neocons that ever lived. Let's look at this and have a little fun, shall we? Trump blames Zelensky for the war in Ukraine. He rarely blames Putin. Oh man, that's what it's all about. That's what this whole war is about. Who Trump blames. That's what we got to be concerned about. And this is what kind of a slob wrote this? Aaron, good old Aaron Blake. Let's click on Aaron Blake. Aaron Blake. Trump, 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 Trump. The GOP, Trump, 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 JD Vance. Look at the articles he wrote. The campaign on the bizarre Trump campaign trail. Trump's bizarre campaign. Wow, back-to-back bizarre Trump campaign. Trump blames Zelensky. January 6th, Trump. The GOP's, they're screwed in the Electoral College. They're sure to lose. January 6th, Trump. I wonder if this guy's a Wookiee. Democrats struggle with black men. He kind of hitting a little too close to home. He better watch. He's going to get himself fired. Trump backers are more primed to doubt the election than they were in 2020. Yeah, I don't think they're going to doubt this one. I don't think the Trump backers are going to be doubting this one. I think they're going to be thumbs up on that one, if you ask me. How a political problem is mental acuity for Trump. Yes, sirree. It ain't Biden. Biden's fine. It's not Harris. She's sharp as a tack. Biden is sharp as a tack, and Harris is as bright as a wet match in a dark cave. JD Vance goes in on a justified lie. You lied, some it's you. All right, let's go. Donald Trump makes curious comments about the war in Ukraine. He has done so much the moment. Okay, so he goes on. But he and his allies have long suggested this is effectively a diplomatic posture. You've got to be able to deal with Vladimir Putin after all, so why would you jeopardize that? His suspiciously friendly public postures towards Russia dates back for years. You're not allowed to say the Russians are human beings. The Russians have security concerns that are legitimate. You ain't allowed to say that. So the Washington Post clearly is there on the money here. On Thursday, he turned more than a few heads by effectively blaming Ukrainian president for Russia's invasion. Trump said Zelensky should never have let the war start. All right, let's talk about that a little bit. Trump's dead wrong. Because let's face it, Vladimir Zelensky is effectively Kamala Harris in a way, right? Why do you think? Look, a quick history lesson for those who might not have heard this. Vladimir Zelensky worked for a company, a media company that was owned by the same guy that was the shadow owner of Burisma, where Hunter Biden worked. And they came up with this television show called Servant of the People. And in that television show, he was a teacher who somehow became president. And guess what he wanted? He wanted to join the EU and NATO, right? So this is a brainwashing CIA operation. And he's a teacher. And this TV show was promoted all over Ukraine. It became the #1 show of Ukraine. It was the toast of Ukraine, right? Vladimir Zelensky is the star of Servant of the People, and he's just from being a teacher, and all of a sudden he's a president, and he wants to join the EU and Ukraine. EU and NATO. And then, interestingly and strangely and oddly, a party popped up, and the name of that party was the Servant of the People Party, owned by the same guy, Kolomoisky, the same oligarch who had interesting ties to the Biden family, shall we say, and that he owned Burisma. So the guy has a TV network. He has a TV show, and Kolomoisky, and this guy's the star. Next thing you know, Kolomoisky's supporting a party, and it's called the Servant of the People Party. They decide, just conveniently, to run a candidate for president. And it's Vladimir Zelensky, the star of Servant of the People. So they do a TV show. They build the TV show. They fund it. They run it all over Ukraine. And then they run the guy in the TV show from the #1 TV show. And they even have a party that's named after the TV show. And Vladimir Zelensky runs on peace. He says, you elect me, and I'll make peace in the Donbass, peace with the Russians, peace, peace, peace. If it's peace you want, you elect me, it's peace you'll get. And he becomes the president, and then he does a U-turn, and it's like the Russians are evil, we got to go to war with them. So I understand Trump blaming Zelensky because he knows he can't. But I think, look, people underestimate Trump. They think he's an idiot. I'm not saying he is or he isn't, but I think he's not as stupid as he plays. I think Trump understands the rules. Could be wrong. I think Trump understands I can't come out and say that this was a whole puppet organization, that the U.S. was behind this 100%. But let's face it, he's close enough to reality. He knows it, right? He knows what's up. And he's friends with RFK Jr. RFK Jr. has said it. They know the truth. Trump knows the truth. So when Trump says Zelensky shouldn't have let this war start, it is my belief that he knows he has to say that stuff. And I can cite, I can cite instances before where Trump has said things that he knew, that we found out later that he knew wasn't exactly the way he said it, but for political purposes, he knew he had to play the game and say it. So he blames Zelensky, but he knows it ain't Zelensky. But at any rate, so they go on. It was a remarkable statement in and of itself. Zelensky was the one whose country was invaded, but it was his fault. Was he supposed to just give Russia the territory it wanted and cave to its threats that it would invade? Okay. Bottom line is that's the pretense that this just happened, that Russia just said, give me all your country or I'll invade. It's playing into something that is a lie, and that a lie that's fading away, right? But it's remarkable for another reason. Let's figure what that is. One that gets at the facile rationalizations of Trump's soft public line on Russia. Trump rarely levels the same kind of judgment against Putin. Okay, so now you see what this article really is. It's Russiagate. That's all it is. It's another Russiagate article. It's not even about Zelensky. It's not about the war. It's simply saying, and when you continue down this article, Trump said at CPAC while doing some cleanup work, it's an outrage and atrocity, should never have been allowed to occur. We're praying for the proud people of Ukraine. God bless them all. So he says it's bad, but so the bottom line is they go on and on and on to say, look, Trump won't say bad things about Putin. That's the old liberal Russiagate thing. Trump won't say bad things about Putin. Well, first of all, of what value would that be? So what? So what? We know that the neocon ideology is to create, and this is not praising Trump, not saying good or bad about Trump. Here's a reality. The neocon ideology is about demonizing any leader of a country that wants to be independent from U.S. imperialism, right? Demonizing Maduro, demonizing Ortega in Nicaragua, demonizing the leaders of Iran, demonizing Putin, demonizing Xi. You've got to demonize any leader. He's horrible, he's evil, he's terrible, because he wants to be independent and do his own damn thing. In fact, when Biden came in, what did he do? He was demonizing MBS, the head of Saudi Arabia, right? Why? They felt that they wouldn't do some things that he wanted, and that's it. So they demonized these people. So that's it. Trump. But what this article is really saying is, Trump won't won't demonize people. Putin. He won't play the game. They said Fox News host Sean Hannity, who often tries to nudge Trump in a more politically palatable direction. Think about this: politically palatable. In other words, acceptable. Play the game. This is where you are. The blob says you got to demonize Putin. So Hannity, when they're true, and they are telling the truth, tries to draw Trump into the blob, right? So he repeatedly coaxed Trump to call Putin evil or an enemy. Trump wouldn't take the bait. He wanted to talk about how this wouldn't have happened on his watch as he had before. Bottom line, Hannity urged Trump to set aside that talking point and more directly answer the question. I think you also recognize he's evil, do you not? Hannity asked. Trump did not, or at least wouldn't say as much. He instead suggested Putin had changed. So think about the infantile nature of this. Their biggest concern is that Trump wouldn't say that he wouldn't give the Washington blob dogma. Come on, man. You're supposed to say Putin's evil. Let me hear you do it. Say Putin's evil. Come on, man. Putin's evil. Let me hear it. You're not one of us. You ain't a member of the team. Come on. You can do it. Putin's evil. Trump's like, nah, I ain't playing that. It doesn't benefit me. I'm trying to get deals. You know me, I wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. When this is over, I need to get a deal with Putin. He didn't say this, but this is the way Trump This is what he could have said, because this is where Trump usually coming from. Sorry, can't call him evil, because then I might not be able to get a deal with him. You got to say it, Trump. No. So then they write an entire article. This is how upset they are that Trump will not repeat the dogma of the blob. This man won't call Putin evil. We got to put an article in the White, and it makes sense that they would write this article for this reason. In their circles, right? In the neoliberal, neoconservative blob machine circles, that is an evil, evil thing. That is unacceptable, man. There are certain rituals that you must do to be a member of this. You know, like in Zen, you have tea rituals that they have, you know what I mean? In ancient China and Japan and some of these Asian countries, they have like tea rituals that you do with your ancestors and incense and stuff like that, right? Okay, those are rituals. We're showing respect to our ancestors, our history, our culture, right? I think some people don't like that stuff. I think that stuff's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. I think it's part of culture. Where they wear beautiful gowns and kimonos and certain special kind of ceremonial teas and the great smelling incense. Great smelly incense and blah, 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 and a little tribute to our ancestors. How wonderful is that, right? But in the blob, the ritual is, here's a list of the evil guys, and you got to say they're all evil. And Trump says, hey, he ain't playing. Nah, sorry, not going by the rituals. And what that means is you're not one of us then. You want to be president and you won't do the necessary rituals? Won't do them. Again, it's not praise of Trump. It's not putting Trump down. I'm just calling it the way I should see it. We got a whole article, and the article is pissed at Trump because he won't say that Putin's evil. And he says, look, this whole idea that Putin just, in a way, what he's saying is this whole idea that Putin just woke up on the wrong side of the bed one day and said, let's spread out and we'll take some Ukrainian land, is preposterous. Because the bottom line is, add this, if that were true, then Trump couldn't get a deal anyway. So Trump obviously doesn't believe it, or he wouldn't think he could get a deal, right? And here's what Trump said. He said, when it comes to cutting a deal, think about this. I got to say it's true. He says, any deal, even the worst deal, would have been better than what we have now. If they had made a bad deal, it would have been much better. Think about that. It's a very logical argument. Look, they've gotten a fight and they got their asses kicked, right? So if I'm sitting there arguing with somebody and the guy says, look, let's make a deal. We each want, we got 6 beers. You want 3 and I want 3. I want all 6 of the beers. You want all 6 of the beers, right? So why don't we do it this way? Shut this down. This may be screwing me up. Let me shut this down. I'm getting some bad. Yeah, okay. I was having some issues. There we go. I think that helped a little bit. I was using a little bandwidth that was going to using for some video that was running. Okay, here's my point. If you said I want 4 beers and you can have 2, and I said no, I'll fight you first, right? It's going to be 3 and 3 or a fight, and we get in a fight, and I get my ass kicked, and I'm laying on the ground, a black eye, swelled up, arm broken, kicked in the groin. I mean, I am in a bad way. And somebody says, Garland, you've been better off if you made a deal and took 1 and gave him 5 to getting your ass kicked. Wouldn't they be telling the truth? At least and this guy kicked my ass and walked away with all 6 beers. Wouldn't I be better off to have taken 1 beer and no ass whipping? That's all Trump's saying. Look, dude, you lost 700,000 people. Your country's been torn to shreds. Don't you possibly think you've lost some of the most energy-rich and resource-rich regions of your country? Perhaps in hindsight, a deal might have been better, right? It's true. He says, if they made a bad deal, it would have been much better, right? It would be better for me to take 1 beer and give the other guy 5 and get my ass kicked. That's the truth, right? All right, let us continue. So it says, so then go. The upshot is Trump is willing to blame Zelensky for not giving in. Trump did not call the war an appalling and a Holocaust. He's largely exercising. So they're saying, Instead, Trump is now casting this as somehow being Zelensky's fault. If that perception catches on with the American people, it's a gift to Putin. They're worried about gifts. Think about this. They're worried about metaphorical gifts to Putin. If you think about this, who's closer to reality? They're writing about metaphorical gifts to Putin. It's a gift to Putin, metaphorically speaking, of course. And Trump is saying the country's getting beat to hell. Let's stop the war. So one group, the Washington Post, is talking about metaphorical gifts to Putin. Trump's talking about physically, kinetically, in the real world, people are dying and the country's getting blown up. I'm not saying that Trump's going to do anything good or not, that he's going to stop the war or not. In fact, I'm going to continue on with this, but here's the bottom line. He's a lot closer to reality than he schleps. That's neoconservatism to you. Neoconservatism is always living in some kind of imaginary universe where the metaphorical issues and similes are more important than what happens in the real world. It's narrative driven. A gift to Putin. No, well, let's forget a gift to Putin. These people getting blown to shreds. Let's stop them from getting blown to shreds. Metaphorical gift to Putin. Those are narratives about a gift to Putin. It's a narrative. Artillery rounds blowing up next to your door to you ain't narratives. That's where you go. So that's the concept of the neoconservatives, of the machine, who tells us that the machine that told us that Biden was sharp as a tack, the machine that tells us that Kamala Harris is a smart Black woman and all that kind of crap that, is going to lead us to a great place and we're all better off if we have her. That's the machine. It's narrative driven. And I think one of the reasons they hate Trump is he can be narrative driven. Yes. He can be ideologically driven. Yes. But there are times when he lives in the real world, physical, kinetic real world. And that ain't acceptable by the blob. Okay. And that just is what it is. Let's continue. Here's another article. Let's go here. Let's stop that one. NBC. You got to love them, right? Paul Krugman. What a Trump presidency could mean for Ukraine and Zelensky's government. Well, first of all, Zelensky's government's going to fall, but okay. Krugman predicts a stark divide in Ukraine's future based on the presidential victory. He believes that if Kamala Harris wins, U.S. support for Ukraine will likely continue, with attrition potentially bringing an end to Russia's aggression. Well, kind of, yeah. Yeah. They call it Russia's aggression. Well, Russia did enter the war in an aggressive manner. Attrition, meaning lots of people will die. Well, here's the thing about it. Attrition bringing an end to Russia's aggression. In other words, if I would put it like this, so many Ukrainians are going to die, and so much of their equipment will get bashed to pieces that they won't be able to fight anymore. And it will bring an end to Russia's attacking them and attacking the country because they will win. So, yeah, you got something there. Conversely, a Trump victory could have dire consequences because, let's face it, Ukraine's doing so well now, right? They're doing so good that dire consequences, things could go bad for them. Think about this. Think about this. You're laying on the ground being beaten to death, and some guy walks up to you and says, "Hey, pal, could get worse." And you're like, this guy's beating me to death. Yeah, but at least he's not stabbing you. Yeah, he's got a knife in his hand. Oh, my God. Well, at least he's not shooting you. Yeah, he's got a machine gun. He's about to shoot me with that. Oh, okay. Never mind. Yes, sirree. Paul Krugman wants to protect Ukraine from dire consequences, unlike their situation now, which is pretty rosy overall. As it may embolden Russia. Again, narrative. Embolden. What the hell does that even mean? They're winning the war. You see, dire consequences, which aren't named. Emboldening Russia, that's narrative driven. That's not kinetic. That's not the real world. Hey, that guy's going to be emboldened. What does that mean? Well, they're winning the war. How much more do you need? I tell you this, winning the war is going to embolden them. Okay. Leading to increased instability in Eastern Europe. Why? Analysts share growing concerns that a Trump presidency could facilitate a more aggressive posture from Moscow, significantly impacting the region's security. What does that mean? It's narrative driven. What does that mean? Aggressive posture. What is an aggressive posture? Hey, put him up, buddy. We're going to fight now. Going to give him the finger. Screw you. That's a more aggressive posture. See, again, they use these worthless words that mean nothing. Uh, Prominent economist and Nobel laureate Paul Krugman, who's wrong about everything, recently discussed the implications, right? Let me see. What does he say? He says, if Harris wins, Ukraine would likely continue to receive substantial U.S. support. If Harris wins, Ukraine will continue to receive support. It seems quite likely that in the end, sheer attrition will bring an end to the Russian war there. Yeah, sheer attrition. Yeah, that's what's going to do it. Well, I can't get anything to go, but we can't go any further. But the bottom line is this: they've got something there where they say, yeah, there's going to be a difference, and that is Trump would like to um, end the conflict, whether he will or not. I don't know. So let's finish up. Got a few minutes left by talking about that. Um, but just reading a couple of things. Let me say this: let's look at the big picture here. What was the Russia conflict about? Right? What was it actually about? The conflict in Russia was simply the neocons' grand chessboard strategy, right? It was, here's what we're going to do. We're going to weaken Russia, right? We're going to take out Russia and Europe. They wanted to take out Europe's economy. They wanted to take out Russia's economy, weaken Russia, access all of Russia's natural resources, eliminate Russia's ability to align with countries in Africa and the Middle East and Latin America, et cetera, right? Strengthen them. And then they could go after China. So you got to weaken Russia and its allies and its ability to align with various non-aligned countries. And eventually you go after China because now you can cut off all the natural resources that China desperately needs from Russia. And there you can hurt China that way. And then basically you can now threaten China and say you will become a neoliberal puppet or else we'll destroy you. Right. So they had to take out Russia first to go after China. What happens if Trump comes along and Trump ain't a part of that big picture? See, that's the thing about Trump. For all of his faults, the one positive thing about Donald Trump is he's not aligned with the big picture in the same way. He's not aligned with the grand chessboard in the same way, because if he were, he couldn't possibly push for an end to the conflict in Ukraine. Not saying that he'll get it, but I'm just saying he couldn't do it if he were aligned with the grand chessboard strategy of taking that out, and then going after China. I don't think Trump wants a war with Russia. I don't think he wants a war with China. I think he wants to do battle with China in the economic sphere and get deals and things like that. I don't think he wants a kinetic war with China. He understands Trump don't want World War III, doesn't want to die, doesn't want a nuclear war. I'm not saying he would or wouldn't. I'm just saying I don't think he wants that. This doesn't point to him being part of the grand chessboard strategy, because you couldn't possibly want to deal with Russia and Ukraine, because let's face it, it is more than anything else. Now, the neocons will argue it's a defeat for the U.S. It's not. It's a victory for the U.S., to tell you the truth. For the U.S. people, for the American people, it's a victory. For the European people, it is a victory. It is a victory because it releases them to some extent from the chokehold, from the evil claws and clutches of the neocons, because what destroys the neocons' grand chessboard plan. Okay. So they would argue it's a loss. It's a win for the people. But what it is it's a loss for neoconservatism. It's a fatal blow for neoconservatism. And NATO is one of the most valuable tools for the neoconservative. It allows them, that's why they're trying to expand NATO. They've said things like, we need a Middle East NATO. We need an Asian NATO. In other words, we need a worldwide war machine so that we can go around and dominate the planet with a war machine. It's too hard for us to dominate the planet with our own war machine now. It's too expensive. We can't afford to do it, and we just can't do it. We don't have the army. We don't have the number of soldiers. We cannot dominate with our war machine. We need cannon fodder. We need little Ukraines everywhere. And NATO will give us that. That's what we can use NATO for, so we can put a bunch of countries in it like we do with Europe and dominate their foreign policy. And they got to do what the hell we tell them to do. And guess what? They all got to buy F-35s, crap like that. In the event that this Ukraine conflict falls apart, it's going to be very, very difficult for NATO to survive, because at that point the boogeyman disappears. See, that's the only way the Russians will end this thing is if they get a security agreement. Otherwise, they're going to keep bashing Ukraine to pieces until there ain't nothing left to fight. There's nothing left to prop up, right? Which I suspect, that's my suspicion that the direction this thing goes. But if in fact the Russians, if Trump would come in and say, look, this is how I phrase it's going to be important. If Trump would come in and say, look, I want a deal, and the Russians say, sure, what they're going to say is, we need a security agreement with Europe, so that we don't have to go through this anymore. Now, of course, the pushback from that would be unbelievable. But for the sake of argument, if they were to get that, what the hell do you need NATO for? What the hell do you need to buy F-35s and all this stuff when you have a security agreement? So that would really, I mean, at that point, and let's face it, NATO's narrative has been the Russians are coming to get us any day, and we got to spend a lot of money so we can be prepared for the day the Russians come get us. But if you get a security agreement, then now you know the Russians ain't going to come get you. And now that money can now be spent for things like, God knows, healthcare for the people in Europe, jobs for the people in Europe, energy for the people in Europe. Now, guess what else if you get that in security agreement? What else are they going to say? We want to get rid of the sanctions. And Trump has said, we need to get rid of the sanctions against Russia. That's really hurting the dollar. So what happens if you get rid of the sanctions? A whole lot of countries are going to say, companies are going to say, there's a lot of money. Let's face it, Russia's economy is booming. It's a gigantic economy. A whole lot of companies are going to say, we want in. That economy's roaring and ours is crap. Right? So at that point, Russia's going to make a fortune, and everybody's going to want to be a piece of Russia, part of Russia, including, including Trump, right? Including the businessmen that are aligned with Trump are going to say, can we get into Russia and get some of this? Everybody's going to want, and now Russia's going to say, you can't invest, but we got a big market. We can work with you. Everybody can eat, right? So it would benefit. It would kind of could save Europe. I don't know if it's possible, but the bottom line is this: Russia's plan, Trump's concept of getting a deal would thwart the neocons once and for all, and it would be of great benefit to Russia if they could get a deal. I don't think they can, because there will be so many attempts. There's so many people that have so much invested economically, politically in this war, and in casting Russia as the enemy. You'll have a battle in Europe, I think, because the people in Europe will want this war over. They'll want it over. And they're going to put a lot of pressure on their people. So let's see what happens. Trump hasn't even won yet. We haven't even seen what's happening with the latest attempt on his life, because it's, let's see, it's 1:45 on a Saturday. Probably got another hour before the next one happens. I don't know. When's he doing his next appearance? Another appearance means another attempt on Trump's life, right? So we'll see how that works out. Right now, things look pretty bleak for Kamala Harris. Let's face it. I mean, she ain't doing so well. The Muslims hate her guts. Black men can't stand her. White guys, I ain't buying it. Nobody. I mean, come on. Who really like who? Where is her foundation for support? I don't know. You know what I mean? But you be Kiev, I guess. No, hell, they don't even want her, and they want out. So at any rate, so that's where we are right now. The Russians don't need a deal. In fact, I think the Russians would rather either do two things. They'd rather win it all, which would be the Americans sit down, because they understand America's in charge, and say, this is what has to happen. The sanctions are gone. All sanctions against Russia are dropped. In writing, Ukraine can't be in NATO. We're going to pull some of our stuff back off of your NATO infrastructure. Is going to be pulled. Some of it's going to be pulled back off of Russia's border, and some other odds and ends here that will make it clear to the world that Russia won. And here's the thing about Trump getting that deal. If Biden gets the deal, that means Biden got his ass kicked by Putin. If Trump gets the deal, which again, I'm pushing. I'm not saying it's going to happen. This is all theoretically in an intellectual discussion. If Trump gets the deal, Trump wins. See, if Biden gets the deal, we're going to kick Putin's ass. We're going to do this. We're going to stop. Blah blah blah. And that means a strategic defeat for the neocons. If Trump would get the deal, it would be a strategic defeat for the neocons, but not for the U.S. It would be a strategic victory for Trump. It would be a strategic and political victory, a loss for the neocons in the U.S. Trump would have said, cast these evil spirits out of the U.S., right? The blob, cast them out. And if they lose, then people are going to go, oh, we lost a strategic defeat to Russia. And Trump's going to say, no, we didn't. That was a victory. We got peace. We got a peaceful settlement, and everybody's going to be better off. And I couldn't argue with him. But I'm just saying, I'm not saying this is going to happen. This is all just a philosophical and intellectual discussion, right? Not saying it's going to happen. Bottom line is, I think Trump also understands what's happening with the U.S. dollar. Now, he said some pretty boneheaded things. Oh, we're going to sanction any country that doesn't use the dollar. Yeah, good luck with that. Let's see how long that works. You think the dollar is crap now. I mean, the sanctions, think about the disjointed statement. All of these sanctions that Trump says, we got to stop sanctioning Russia and these other countries because these sanctions are hurting the dollar. But anyone who doesn't use the dollar, we're going to sanction them. There's a contradiction there, isn't it? There's an obvious contradiction there. So Trump's got some things to work out. And again, that's why I'm not a person that looks at Trump's presidency and says, oh, this is going to be a great thing for America. I just probably, if I'm honest with myself, I probably say, if Harris' team wins, we're done. I don't see how we live another 4 years. There's going to be, if Harris wins, you can kiss your ass goodbye. If Harris wins, you're just about sure to have a nuclear war. Maybe we wouldn't even make it a year, and then we all die. I mean, I'm not being facetious here. I think there's a lot of people that understand that that's a reality. If she wins, enjoy yourself. Go out, get yourself some beers, drink what you want, do whatever it is you wanted to, always wanted to do, because you ain't got a lot of time to do it, right? Not saying that wouldn't happen if Trump wins. Not saying we'll even make it to January 20th if he does win. I'm just saying, if that team we have in comes in for another 4 years, they ain't going to finish those 4 years, and neither are we. That's my point, which is, it is what it is. So, if that's the time we go, you go. You couldn't go at the wrong time, right? But we're all going to die sooner or later. It's a matter of when some of us who are right now talking, saying, oh my gosh, we'll be dead in 4 years. We'll be dead in 4 years anyway. You'll die of a heart attack, cancer, get hit by a train, slip on the stairs, on a banana peel, whatever the case may be. You're right. So none of us are promised tomorrow. So there's no point living in horror of when you're going to die. Live in the present. Enjoy your life right now. Tomorrow ain't promised to you. I'm just saying, and I'm not saying any of these things are right, wrong, or indifferent. These are my beliefs and my thoughts, and we'll see what happens. All right. Bottom line is, I'm out of here. Before I go, though, I think it is critical that I look at super chats. We're going to look at the super chat because I always get great questions. And now that I got time, what do we got? We get questions. A super sticker. Thanks, Ivan. Good old Ivan. All right, we get some good questions from the super chats. We're looking at the super chats. Hope some people are coming to New York. I'll be there with Scott Ritter and Jimmy Dore and everybody next week. Okay, Raphael says, gee, let me see how dynamic you are. Okay, I want to know how dynamic I am. I'm excited about this. Caitlin Clark, WNBA. What say you? Which side you on? Are you too crazy about her? Sure, I'd love to talk about Caitlin Clark briefly. When I first heard about Caitlin Clark, it was from my daughter. My daughter loves sports, right? My daughter, let me tell you this. My daughter's a real kind of girly girl. I mean, she's a girly girl. Wouldn't want to break a nail, right? But she was an only child growing up, and I'm sitting there watching sports, and she's sitting there on my lap with daddy watching sports on the couch, right? We're very close. And she became a sports aficionado, so much so that when she got married, she got in all of these football, what do they call them? Fantasy leagues with her husband, because he's into the fantasy leagues. He was in 4 fantasy leagues. She won 3 out of 4. She loves sports. She knows sports. She watches sports all the time, right? So when I heard about, and I'm not saying that she continued that, but I mean, she made a splash, shall we say. They thought a little girly girl like her wasn't going to be able to, know sports, but she's really good with her sports. She loves it. Dad, right? It happens. And she said, "Oh, Garland, Dad, have you seen Caitlin Clark?" And okay, you got to watch her. All right, I'll come over. I'll watch. I'm like, holy crap, that girl can play. She's a baller. She's a baller, right? And my daughter's a big Caitlin Clark fan, and I watched her, and it's a lot of fun. And apparently, there's some I don't even understand it. People are arguing about her. I don't even know what they're arguing about. I played basketball in high school. I played community college basketball. I had a possibility for a scholarship, which I turned down to do other things. I was a pretty good ball player. And I played in leagues for years and years and years, right? Love the game of basketball, love to watch basketball, big Michael Jordan fan. When she played for the Wizards, I used to take my daughter to the game all the time. You know, she was a kid, she loved Michael Jordan, and as all kids did, right? So, um, either you can play or you can't. And I watched Caitlin Clark, and she's a baller. She can play. So to me, there's nothing else to talk about with Caitlin Clark other than, man, she can play, man. She can shoot. She's the Steph Curry, and she's the Steph Curry of WNBA. She's got incredible range. She can handle a pill. She can dish. She can throw the dimes. I mean, she's got moves. She's a baller, man. I enjoy watching her play. I think she has been great for women's basketball. And let's face it, I mean, people ain't going to watch women's basketball unless they got something to watch. And she's a straight baller. So big fan of Caitlin Clark. Love love her game, and that's all I can think of about Caitlin Clark. To me, all the discussion about cultural stuff, forget it. I don't care. Oh, she's straight. And there are people talk, well, there's a lot of gay women and she's straight. That's why they like her. I don't even want to hear that stuff. She's in the NBA. Either you can play ball or you can't. WNBA, either you can play ball or you can't. People watch her, and she's brought all this attention to the NBA, not because she's straight or gay or pretty or white, because she can ball. Man, when I used to watch basketball back in the day, Bird, that white dude could rock, man. He was awesome. I'm a big fan of Bird. Chris Mullin, I didn't care. Jordan, Pippen, Magic, I didn't care. The guys could ball. Either you can play or you can't. When you're on the court, man, you're playing with guys on your team. What do you want? You want the best team you can get. Who cares what color they are? So it's sports. I love sports. Caitlin Clark is a baller. Big fan of Caitlin Clark. That's all I got for her. She's a baller, man, and I love watching her game, and I love her game. Enjoy it. Most, if not all, negative things heard about Putin are from relentless Western propaganda. Agreed, including false flags causing Putin derangement syndrome. Putin is actually a reasonable and righteous man. I agree with all of that stuff. I think he's a brilliant statesman. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, incredible background, incredible knowledge. He's a very impressive man, very impressive, and he's got a lot of seems wise to me. Yeah, look, that's the game. Demonize Putin. I think one of the things that happens with Trump is he gets the same thing as Putin. Everything, it's Trump derangement syndrome, it's Putin derangement syndrome. So they created an environment where they put Trump in a bag with Putin. So why would Trump? He's cutting his own throat if he goes into the Putin derangement syndrome. So he ain't doing it, and he knows he'll never get a deal. The Sparkster says, off topic, Israel's killed far more Americans than Iran has. Remember the USS Liberty? Look, Iran has every right to be pissed at us. The United States overthrew the government of Iran and stole their oil. And like we do all the time, we overthrew the government. We put in a dictator, the Shah of Iran, and stole their oil. We literally owe Iran reparations. Iran had a 1979 revolution and took their country back. Hooray and bully for Iran. They should have. It's their country. We got no right. We overthrew their country and stole their resources. Hooray for Iran. I'm on Iran's side. Freedom for Iran. That's my position. Freedom from U.S. imperialism. All countries have a right to freedom and independence and sovereignty. And the U.S. has no right. We stole their stuff. Get the hell out. And Israel ain't our friends, and we ain't their friend. Israel's a political tool just like Ukraine, and they're being torn to shreds just like Ukraine. Lucas says, mixing Banderite and Arab refugees in the EU is going to be fun, specifically with all the gears that is going to get lost after the collapse. Oh, yes, sir, buddy. There's going to be, the Banderites are going to be running around Europe with shoulder-launched man pads, which are anti-aircraft devices, with shoulder-launched anti-tank missiles. Oh, it's going to be fun in Europe when the Banderites show up after the war. And I'm being facetious. Anything. Oh, we got some more. Let's go. Christos says, have some faith, brother. At least we have joy. Right there we go. I have faith. Somehow I think we're going to make it. I really believe we're going to make it. Alex says, thank you, Garland. Oh, Christos again. Never in my life did I ever think I would vote for hunger, death, but beyond all that, joy. Raphael says, Putin was asked, when will the war end? And he said, the war will end when the West gets tired of fighting. Dude, you were so right about him from the start. Yeah, that's attrition. Thank you. And let's see what ADEC says. Thanks, Garland. I want to hear your take on free speech these days. Yeah, I wish there was free speech. I'll put it like this, ADEX. My talk on free speech is this. There ain't nothing for me to talk about. Because here's the thing about it, if you think about it. If they say you have free speech until you need it, you got free speech. Okay, great. I want to criticize the government. Well, you don't have it now. Well, then I never had it. Unless you have it all the time, unless you have it when you can criticize the government at the worst possible time, you never had it in the first place. So no, there was the illusion of free speech in the West. There was the illusion of freedom and free speech in the U.S. It was never there. And there are a lot of us a lot of us in America always knew it was never there. The dissidents always knew it wasn't there. The people that never had access to the free speech always knew that there was no free speech, and that's particularly the dissident community. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the lack of free speech. How about we next go to Raphael says, "Gee, do you think Putin knows about Yamamoto? Zelensky loves to fight. His advisors cannot tell him about how he handled that dude." I don't know about Yamamoto myself, so I don't know. But at any rate, thanks a lot. Sorry about that. The last thing I'll say is this. I'm out of here, but the last thing I'll say is this. Don't forget, everybody, as you know, Radio Sputnik's closed. So this is what I do. My job is gone. And I still, so people are like, how are you going to eat? Well, I was in law enforcement. I retired. I do have a retirement, but let's face it, it ain't, $1 million by any stretch of the imagination. You know what I mean? A police, it'll put some food on the table and keep the lights on, but it ain't gonna, set the world on fire. So anyone, if you can afford Patreon, a monthly there, or buy me a coffee, which is buy me a coffee. If you look in the show notes, all that stuff is there. If you can afford to contribute, particularly if you can become a monthly, because buy me a coffee now is just like Patreon. You can do the monthly thing, or you can just do one thing at a time, 5 at a time, or whatever. So if you can afford that, also, and this is important, I have a Substack. If you go to my Substack, and it's $4.99 a month, I think it is. So that would be great if a lot of people join my Substack. That would help out a lot. So anybody that can help the channel, I appreciate it. I got big things I'm planning on doing. One of them is eat. I'm hoping I can pull that one off, because the other one are going to be kind of difficult if the first one is not. I'm not able to do the first one. But at any rate, I'm going to be in New York next week. That's going to be fantastic with Scott Ritter and Jimmy Dore and Danny Haifong and the whole crew. That's going to be fun next week. So anybody who can do that, I appreciate it. Anybody who can contribute, I appreciate it. You all have a wonderful day. Share this on all your social media platforms. Peace. I am out.